what goes around comes around. The bottom line is finally the dictator of Damascus has been overthrown. He's been overthrown in very, very quick period of time, probably less 7 days, taking everyone by surprise. Perhaps a good explanation as to why this has happened so quickly is that the Assad regime, which has been bolstered and propped up principally by Iran and Russia, have obviously been diverted with other activities. But specifically, it's Iran that we should focus on, because Iran, which is the axis of terror in that area, which is determined to create this Shiite arc of control, has experienced a very severe erosion of that power, principally through what has gone on in Gaza through the removal or the destruction of Hamas, and also what has gone on particularly in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So that their proxies have been severely weakened. So actually, the fact that this evil butcher has been overthrown should lead to celebrations for Israel, for thanking Israel for weakening these proxies that has enabled the freedom and hopefully the birth of democracy to take place in Damascus. And
but
one
Richard, yeah, go on. Well, before you get to that point, well, actually finish your point, then I'll come back. Go on.
Okay, and one last point is you previously spoke about the number of people that have been slaughtered by Assad, which is optimistically, if that's the right word, 500,000, pessimistically 1 million. I haven't seen one single demonstration in London over the last umpteen years, when so many more, 10 times the number that have happened in Gaza. Not one demonstration calling death to Assad, death to Syria. But that tells you a whole lot of things, which is a different conversation.
Well, it is. Muslim on Muslim killing's fine, but it's not fine when Israelis are doing it. Is that the point?
But that's precisely it.
Can't argue with that.
It should
Richard.
all be the same. Death is a bad thing.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, to be honest. So I have nothing to say other than I agree with you. Let me ask you this. You said, Richard, this could hail the birth of democracy in that country. Haven't we learnt our lessons about being very, very sanguine too quickly when these things happen? Look at what happened in Afghanistan after the fall of Ashraf Ghani.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with the point. I mean, perhaps that is me being very optimistic, but the point is, time we've seen a desire for democratic change across the Arab countries. We saw it in the spring uprising. Unfortunately, that failed. That tells me there is a momentum, there is a desire to have a better life, a better world.
But Richard, what do we know about these groups, though, in terms of their attitude to Israel? They're not exactly going to be fluffy, cuddly, let's all hold hands with Benjamin Netanyahu, are they? Come on.
No, absolutely not. And so much so that when they were very close to the Golan Heights in the last 24, 48 hours, Israel has had to beef up its military presence there and make it clear to them that they should not turn right. They should carry on south, and not to, so yeah, the answer to your question is, some people say better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. But I think we have to just try and be a little bit positive and optimistic.
Well,
we've got rid of the most evil dictator, or one of the most evil dictators there. And I emphasize again, would not have happened had Israel not done and demolished those terrorist proxies. Iran would still be there supporting them. Maybe perhaps people, when they demonstrate against Israel, might just have a second thought that Israel isn't that evil force that they all want us to believe.
I think you've made the point very well. Soft-spoken ophthalmologist turns complete and utter monster against his own people. I don't think many people will be shedding too many tears for Bashar al Assad. We'll see what comes next. Richard, thank you for your optimism. Nick in Ilford, afternoon.
Hi, Ali. I think we can all agree that Bashar al Assad had to go. He was a monster. But I think Syria's just got screwed by local powers such as Israel and Turkey. Israel's already sent tanks into parts of Syria, a so-called buffer zone. Turkey's had its hands on this going on. It's only really hit the news, but I was reading stuff that was going on 2 weeks ago on the border with Turkey, that the Turkish are up to. Just before this all started, Israel bombed 5 bridges in Syria. And this guy, I mean, I'm expecting the petition to be started to bring Shamima Begum straight back, because apparently this guy, what's his name, Mohammed al Jolani is great now, according to MI5. So let's all have big hugs with these people. He was beheading people. Up to a few weeks ago, America had a £10 million bounty on this guy's head.
Well, it was also, Nick, to be fair, and I don't mean this in any other way, that his ruthless efficiency, this chap, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who's the head of HTS, which is just one of the groups, by the way. Anyone getting overexcited about the fact that HTS is going to be the saviour of Syria should be a bit mindful of the fact that there are multiple groups there and an accommodation is going to have to be made. Now, this guy, he's got a civilian government up there, as I understand it, in Idlib, and they were focusing on building drones and missiles domestically, which has been pretty effective. So you've got to give him that, but we shall see where it goes. Nick, always a pleasure to talk to you. Ali in Hounslow, afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ali, and thank you for accepting my call again. I do have an interest. I was born in the Middle East, not in Syria, further southern part of the wider Middle East. And I have an interest as well, and I like history as well. My point of view that the toppling of Bashar al Assad, it's the end of secularism. Socialist secularism it's the final chapter. Saddam Hussein Ba'athist has ended. Bashar al Assad, Baathism, secularism has ended, and we need to take into fact. Yes, he was brutal. However, he offered a secular society where minorities were treated equally, and the danger is, what I fear the most is, which is unfortunate, Syria will be. It is a new chapter of proxy warfare now. Ikhwan, Islam Brotherhood are in ascendance, backed by Qatar, Turkey. Will the Saudi, will Emirates, will Egypt accept this? And also, Benjamin Netanyahu, indirectly, he managed to end the Shia presence of influence. Hezbollah is now isolated, and the corridor link between Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon is shattered down. And also, we need to address this, which could be a danger. The best solution for Syria is to remain partition territories. Let the Kurds rule their area, let the Sunnis rule their area, and what is more important, let the Alawites control the coastal region. Now, if the HTF or whatever Islamists enter the coastal line, what would happen to us? Now, there's a British Overseas Protectorate in Cyprus that is near the Alawite coastal region. Now, if we see, like what happened in the 70s, South Vietnam, boatloads of Alawites and also minorities seek refuge in Cyprus and the British Overseas Territory, will we have to accept them and bring them over to Britain?
It's fascinating. It's a fascinating analysis, Ali, and I'm very grateful to you for it.
That's why we have to maintain state. Look, let the Kurds rule the area, let the Sunnis control their territory, and which is so important, and it allows Russia to maintain their base in the Alawite coastal regions. Because if the Russians are removed from there, then we'll have a problem with Diego Garcia. The reason why Russians built a base in Syria was when Anwar Sadat in 1972 expelled the Russians from the bases in Egypt due to the peace accord with Israel.
Understood. But the interest, and all of this is very interesting. The point that I found particularly interesting was your assertion that whatever you think of Assad, he was a secular socialist, and the secular socialists are now, we've seen their demise. What do you think? What's your fear, Ali? Very briefly, that can give rise to extremism, Islamism.
Yeah,
what?
Absolutely. Well, there's factional rivalries. I know for sure Saudi Arabia and Emirates, as well as Egypt, will be quaking at their boots. They cannot see the Ikhwan Islamist Muslim Brotherhood ascend back into power. This will give an alternative governance that would threaten the monarchies across the Gulf of Middle East and Gulf.
Fascinating analysis. I really do appreciate it.
I think we have to think critically about this. What we can see is that the Western media are salivating at the prospect of regime change in Syria. Why? And why now? And I think if we look at that, we can see that there are players playing the game that are benefiting from this. There's claims of an energy pipeline going from Qatar through Syria up towards Israel and Turkey, and Assad was standing in the way of that. So it looks like the rebels, who are ISIS and Al-Qaeda, have been backed. I don't know by who. I would imagine by
Well, they wouldn't say
Israel,
they're
America,
Al-Qaeda
UK.
now. They wouldn't say they're Al-Qaeda now. They would say, at least one of them would say they were formerly Al-Qaeda, but there are many rebel groups of varying different hues.
Well, a leopard doesn't change its spots. I've seen videos coming out of Syria the last week or so of people beheading each other.
Yeah, I agree.
And for me, your question is, what does this mean for the Middle East? I would also ask, what does it mean for us? I think us, as the West, we have lost our moral compass, because the last few years, people and politicians have backed the Azov Brigade in Ukraine. They're now backing extremists in Syria. And more than just asking why they're doing that, we have to ask why. What's the benefit? And who's benefiting? And for me, it's about control of resources. And just as an individual, I do not think this is a good thing whatsoever. And I just wish the best for the people of Syria, and I wish the worst for the Western controllers who seek to take advantage of countries like Syria and elsewhere in the world.
Well, I understand the point that you're making, but others would argue that look at what Donald Trump has said. He said it's not our fight. We don't have a dog in this fight. We're going to keep out of it. So in that sense, William, I mean, do you think that the West has been sticking its oar in unnecessarily? I mean, we know that this place has been a basket case for years. We know that Assad was a brutal dictator. We know that the West tried to think about quashing him when he was using chemical weapons against his own people, and then bottled it. It didn't go through. And I understand why it bottled it, because it had the experience of Iraq and Afghanistan before that. So when we do intervene, when we do stick our oar in, it doesn't really turn out too well, does it?
Exactly, it doesn't turn out well. I mean, look what happened in Iraq after we intervened with Saddam Hussein.
Well, now you've got 9-year-old. Now you've got the age of consent lowered to 9 years old.
Exactly, yes. So, and there's also Libya. Did we leave Libya better off? And there's all these alternative narratives that actually, there was things that were good in Libya, and there's not everything is bad in Syria.
But you could
they
say,
have free healthcare, free education.
Yeah, but you could say, William, that Assad was being propped up by the Russians and the Iranians. Now, both of them have been distracted by other issues, and they've decided to cut him loose because, frankly, it was a lost cause. I mean, they may have made that calculus in some way, right? They gave, I think the Russians gave some very, very tactical airstrikes, and it wasn't really going to make a difference. So they've given up on this. How is the West involved now?
Well, I think that's perhaps where we could agree that there is evidence there that Assad was being propped up by the regimes.
Yeah,
but from what I could see, there's evidence now that this new lot who have come in are also being propped up. And so those other people, those in other countries, are benefiting from this. Which is why what I want the best for the people in Syria. And I'm not sure this is what this is.
Well, I think it's going to be a complete haven of proxy interests for years to come. And that is very, very worrying indeed. William, thank you for your call. Vincent in Glasgow. Afternoon.
Hi, Ali. I think it's a terrible day for Syria. If you're a Christian or a Yazidi, if there are any Yazidis left in Syria, that is, this is a terrible day. But it goes back to what your last caller was saying. Do you remember what Afghanistan and Iran was like in the 50s before the CIA overthrew their governments in the coup?
Well, Afghanistan.
Women had rights.
Yeah.
Women had rights. They could go out without a male escort. They weren't forced to wear Islamic coverings, but because they were close to Russia, they had to go, and the CIA overthrew their governments. Now, it's like what's happening today in Syria. You can go back to 2012, and it's even reported in mainstream media that the CIA backed and funded the FSA, al-Nusra, and Al-Qaeda. And even going back to before 2012, before the Syrian civil war, quote-unquote, began, Western intel agencies were shaping the public perception in the West in terms of what was going on there. I mean, Ali, do you remember Syrian Girl? Do you remember?
No, tell me. Remind us.
Syrian Girl was a blogger who was reported in the West, right, that she was being persecuted by the Assad government for being a lesbian. Syrian Girl turned out to be a CIA officer called Maxwell and his wife in Scotland. Right. Then, back then, you had tens of thousands of ISIS fighters from Europe and America that were recruited online, travelled to Syria through a NATO country, Turkey.
But you also had the Wagner group operating there, Vincent. I mean, if you want to go down that road, I mean, all different parties were involved.
The difference is, right, but the difference is, right, we are supposed to believe the GCHQ, the NSA, the CIA, etc., didn't know the IP addresses of all of these online sites that were recruiting thousands of ISIS fighters.
Vincent, lots of different countries, both neighbouring and further afield, have got interests in Syria. That we can understand. Where do we go now? What is the future now, Vincent?
Well, I think the future is this. Do you remember Robert Kagan and the Project for a New American Century?
I do.
They listed 7 nations that they would overthrow: Iraq, Sudan, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and Iran. All of them have fallen. There's just one left to go.
Yeah, but I remember Wolfowitz talking about the neo conservative doctrine and sticking their oar in all over the Middle East. I don't think Trump is that man, in my view. Far from it. I don't think he's got any interest whatsoever in getting involved.
Trump.
Well, it might do, but Trump's going to be in power in January, so we'll see what happens. I don't think you can give one thing to Trump. He doesn't really have the time or the patience for wars where he doesn't see a strategic interest, and he hasn't really started any. So we'll see what happens. Vincent, thank you for your call. Jim in Hastings, after me.
Hello.
Go ahead, Jim. Your line's not brilliant. Go on.
Okay, I'm really sorry about that.
No, it's better now. Better now.
I'm really sorry that we haven't got a global institution where there might be some framework going forward. You had a caller on earlier saying about the role of Israel in undermining Iran and its plan, but the UN has been undermined and the credibility of the UN has been undermined. And I've got personal experience of that because of the reunification of Cyprus and the Annan plan. Where the Greek Cypriots voted in a referendum against the reunification under the Annan plan at a time when who knows what would have happened. And the people, if anyone is leveraging the situation to try and advantage themselves and their agenda, that's why we need a UN. All it's proving is we need a global institution with some credibility.
But Jim, I don't disagree with you. But the UN is only as strong as the key powers within it and if they want to play ball or not. I mean, if you've got P5, the Permanent 5 Security Council members, including the US, Russia, China, the UK and France, right? If they don't want to play ball, nothing will happen in the UN. And there are other people who they're going to support through their measures that they take and the resolutions they support. It is what it is. It's the art of the possible. And I don't say Guterres' job is easy in any way, but it's all that we have. It's not going to improve.